Can you count your friends on one hand? Or maybe you cannot count them at all because there is nobody to count. And somewhere along the way, people started using words about you: strange, arrogant, antisocial, cold, too intense, hard to get to know. Maybe they said it to your face, or maybe you simply overheard it, or maybe you just felt it in the way conversations shifted when you walked into a room. And somewhere quieter than that, you started to wonder if they were right. Whether there is something missing in you that everyone else received. Whether other people got a manual for this that you never got handed. I want you to stop right now before you go one more day carrying that. Because psychology has a very different explanation for people who have few friends and who genuinely prefer their own company. And it is not the explanation you have been given. The research is remarkably consistent on this point. People who choose solitude tend to possess a specific cluster of traits that are genuinely rare in the general population, not better. Rare, there is a difference, and I am going to be honest with you about both throughout this video. Today, I am going to walk you through 8 of those traits. And as I describe them, I want you to do something specific. Notice which ones give you that particular jolt of recognition, the one where you think, how does he know that about me? Because I suspect several of them will. And stay with me until the very end, because the 8th one is the one almost nobody talks about, and it explains something about your life that you have probably never been able to explain to anyone else. It is the reason a room full of people can leave you more exhausted than a full day of hard work. But before we begin, I want to ask something of you, and it is not a small thing. So please actually do it. Go down to the comments right now and answer this. What is the one thing people get most wrong about you? Not the surface version, the real one. The assumption they make about your quietness, your distance, your small circle that has never once been true. Write it out. Because something happens when you put it into words that does not happen while it stays a feeling. And then, and this is the part that matters most, scroll and read what other people wrote. Find someone whose comment could have been written by you and reply to them. Say something. Because here is the thing about people like us. We are not actually rare in number. We are rare in visibility. There are millions of us, all sitting alone, all convinced we are the only one. The comment section below this video is one of the few places where that isolation actually breaks. So do not just read it, join it. And do me 2 more kindnesses. Leave a like and subscribe with notifications turned on, because that is how this finds the next person sitting alone thinking there is something wrong with them. And if this content brings real value to your life and you would like to support the work directly, consider becoming a member of the channel. Membership is what allows me to keep researching, writing, and producing these videos every single week, and every member genuinely makes a difference. Whether you join or not, you are welcome here, and I am glad you are here. Now, before we get to the 8 traits, I need to say something honest, because too many videos on this subject are pure flattery, and flattery is not the same as truth. There is a critical difference between solitude and loneliness, and everything in this video depends on it. Solitude is chosen. It nourishes. You come out of it more yourself, not less. When you spend an evening alone with a book and a cup of tea and you feel restored, that is solitude, and it is one of the healthiest things a human being can do. Loneliness is different. Loneliness is not chosen, and it does not nourish. It hollows. You come out of it emptier. It is the ache of wanting connection and not having it, or having connection and not being reached by it. And here is why this matters so much. They can look identical from the outside. 2 people alone on a Saturday night. Same apartment, same silence, same absence of plans. One is at peace. One is quietly dying inside. Nobody watching could tell the difference. So as we go through these 8 traits, I want you to hold one question in the back of your mind and answer it honestly. Only to yourself. Is my solitude feeding me or is it costing me? Because if it is feeding you, everything in this video is a celebration of who you are, and you should stop apologizing for it immediately. And if it is costing you, this video is still for you, but it is a different kind of gift. Because most of these traits, taken too far, become the exact walls that keep the right people out. And I would be doing you no favors at all if I told you those walls were your personality. Now, with that honesty in place, let us begin. The first trait is that you are deeply, almost physically, irritated by fake people. You know the moment I am describing. Someone is talking, and everything they are saying is pleasant and appropriate, and something in you has already gone quiet. Not because they said anything wrong, because you can feel the performance underneath the words. There is a gap between what they are saying and what they actually mean, and you can feel that gap the way you feel a draft in a room. And once you feel it, you are done. You may stay physically, you may keep nodding, but you have left. You are not the person who praises someone falsely to be liked. You are not the one who laughs at the joke that was not funny because everyone else is laughing. You are not the one who agrees with the group opinion in the room and then privately disagrees in the car on the way home. You would rather be alone and true than surrounded and false. And I want you to understand where this comes from, because it is not simply personality. For most people who have this trait strongly, it was built. Somewhere in your history, you trusted a version of someone that turned out not to be real, maybe several times, and your system developed an alarm for it, a very sensitive one, and that alarm has never been turned off since. That is the gift. It genuinely protects you from a great deal of wasted time and a great deal of pain. But here is the honest cost, and this is where I have to be a real friend rather than a flattering one. That alarm does not always distinguish between a person who is being fake and a person who is simply being awkward. Social nervousness looks a lot like performance from the outside. Someone who is trying too hard because they want you to like them can trigger the exact same signal as someone who is trying too hard because they want something from you. And I have watched people with this trait write off perfectly genuine human beings who were simply bad at first impressions. So keep the alarm. It is valuable. But learn to ask it one question before you act on it. Is this person being false, or are they just uncomfortable? Because the answer is different more often than you would think, and some of the best people in the world are terrible at meeting new people. And there is one more piece of this trait worth naming, because it explains something that has probably confused you for years. You are almost certainly worse at hiding your own reactions than the average person. When you sense falseness, something in your face changes, and you often do not know it has happened until you see the other person's expression shift. This is why people sometimes describe you as intimidating or as difficult to read, when internally you were simply reacting honestly. The general population has learned to keep a pleasant expression regardless of what they think. You never fully learn that skill, partly because performing an emotion you do not feel is the exact thing this trait revolts against. So you go through life with a slightly more honest face than most people, and you pay a social price for it that nobody ever explains to you. And that sensitivity to what lies beneath the surface leads directly to the second trait, because people who notice depth in others usually got there by first developing depth in themselves. The second trait is that you think in depth, and small talk genuinely exhausts you. Your mind does not stay on the surface of things. You go down. You want to know why something is the way it is, what it means, where it came from, and what it says about people in general. You have opinions about topics nobody asked you about, formed over years of thinking that nobody witnessed. And so ordinary conversation becomes strangely difficult for you, not because you cannot do it. You can. You can talk about weather and traffic and what someone did over the weekend perfectly well. It is that doing it costs you something. 15 minutes of surface conversation can leave you more drained than 2 hours of real discussion. Other people leave a party energized by exactly the interactions that left you hollow. You have probably had this experience. You are in a group, everyone is talking, and you are silently waiting for the conversation to become real. And it never does. And you go home feeling like you were never actually there. But put you in a genuine conversation at 11 at night, the kind where somebody says something true about their life and something in you comes fully awake. You will lose track of time. You will remember that conversation for years. One of those is worth 100 parties to you. Now, the honest side of this trait. Depth can become a form of superiority without you ever intending it, and this is worth watching carefully. It is very easy to slide from small talk drains me to small talk is beneath me, and those are not the same statement at all. Because here is something worth understanding. Small talk is not stupidity. Small talk is a social protocol. It is how human beings check whether it is safe to go deeper. It is the handshake before the conversation. When someone asks about the weather, they are very often not asking about the weather. They are asking whether you are open, whether you are safe, whether there is a door here. And people who refuse the handshake never get to the conversation. So you do not have to love small talk, but it helps enormously to see it for what it actually is, not the opposite of depth, but the entrance to it. Many of the deepest relationships of your life will begin with 3 minutes of something completely trivial. There is also a loneliness specific to this trait, and it is worth naming because so few people describe it. It is not the loneliness of having nobody around. It is the loneliness of being surrounded and unreached, of sitting at a table with 6 people who like you, talking about nothing, while the thing actually occupying your mind goes unmentioned for the entire evening. That particular ache confuses people because on paper, you were not alone at all. You had company, you were included, and you went home feeling emptier than if you had stayed in. If that has happened to you repeatedly, you are not ungrateful and you are not impossible to please. You simply need a different kind of nourishment than the gathering was offering, and there is no shame in that. Though there is a cost, because you will have to actively seek out the conversations you need rather than waiting for them to occur naturally in group settings. They rarely do. And this brings us to the third trait, which is one of the healthiest things on this entire list, and also the one most easily taken too far. The third trait is that you have genuine boundaries and you know how to say no. Most people cannot do this. That is not an exaggeration. Most people say yes to things they do not want to do, attend things they do not want to attend, and maintain relationships that drain them, all because the discomfort of refusing feels worse to them than the cost of agreeing. You are not most people. You have learned somewhere along the way that your peace has a value, and that value is not negotiable for the sake of avoiding an awkward conversation. When something does not sit right with you, you say so. When someone repeatedly crosses a line, you do not deliver 11 warnings. You step back, and often you step back permanently. And you do it without the drama that most people attach to endings. You do not announce it. You do not build a case. You simply become less available, and then unavailable, and the relationship quietly concludes. This is genuinely rare. Most people cannot end anything cleanly. They stay in draining friendships for a decade because they do not know how to leave without a fight. But I have to name the shadow here because it is a real one and I have seen it cost people dearly. There is a difference between a boundary and a wall. A boundary says, this is what I will and will not accept, and here is the line. It is communicated. The other person knows where they stand, and they have the opportunity to respect it. A wall says, you disappointed me once, and now you are gone, and I will never tell you why. And here is the uncomfortable question. How many of your endings included a conversation? How many people in your past have no idea what they did? because if the answer is most of them, then what you have may not be boundaries. It may be an exit strategy that activates at the first sign of imperfection. Real relationships include disappointment, every single one of them. The people who love you best will occasionally let you down, misunderstand you, and fail to be what you needed on a specific day. If your boundary system removes anyone who does that, you will end up with a very peaceful life and nobody in it. So keep the boundaries, they are one of your greatest strengths. But consider giving people one honest conversation before the door closes. Some of them will surprise you, and the ones who do not have simply confirmed what you suspected, and you have lost nothing. And boundaries only work if you are genuinely comfortable with what lies on the other side of them. Which brings us to the fourth trait. The fourth trait is that you are not afraid of being alone, and this makes you almost incomprehensible to most people. Here is something worth understanding about the general population. A large number of people are quietly terrified of their own company, not of solitude in the abstract, but of the specific experience of sitting in a room with no distraction and nothing between them and their own thoughts. Watch what happens when people are alone. The television goes on the moment they walk through the door. The phone comes out at every red light, in every elevator, in every silence longer than 4 seconds. Music plays constantly. There is a low, steady effort to ensure that the inner room is never entered. And a great deal of what passes for friendship in the world is precisely this: not connection, but avoidance. People filling their calendars so they never have to sit with themselves. You can sit with yourself. You can spend an entire evening with no plans, no company, no noise, and feel entirely fine. You can eat a meal alone in a restaurant without discomfort. You can take a long walk with no music. You can sit with your own thoughts, including the difficult ones, without needing to escape them. This is not a small thing. This is arguably one of the most valuable psychological capacities a human being can develop, and most people never do. But here, more than anywhere else in this video, I need to be honest with you, and I want you to receive this with the care I intend. There is a version of this trait that is genuine peace, and a version that is a very sophisticated form of avoidance, and they can be extremely difficult to tell apart from the inside. Real comfort with solitude is open. You could be around people you simply do not need to be. The door is unlocked, and you have chosen the quiet. The other version is closed. You are alone because being with people has become frightening or exhausting or disappointing so many times that withdrawal became the safer option. And over time, the withdrawal built a story about itself. I prefer being alone. I do not need anyone. People are exhausting. And that story is very comfortable and very hard to question because it explains everything without requiring anything. Here is a test you can apply privately, and only you will know the answer. When an invitation arrives, notice what happens in your body first, not what you decide. What happens first? Is there a moment of warmth, a flicker of interest before you decline for perfectly good reasons? Or is there relief when plans get canceled that goes deeper than tiredness? If it is the first, you have solitude, and it is a gift. If it is the second, honestly, then something is protecting you from something, and that is worth looking at gently, without shame, because a person who is hiding does not usually know they are hiding. And this distinction matters enormously for the next trait, which is what actually happens when someone does get through. The fifth trait is that you are extraordinarily loyal to the very few people who make it through. This is where people misunderstand you most completely. They see a small circle and assume you are cold, distant, or incapable of closeness. The opposite is true, and it is almost comically so. You may have 1 or 2 people, possibly 3, and for those people, there is essentially no limit. You would drop anything. You would drive through the night. You would give money you do not have. You remember what they told you in a difficult conversation 4 years ago, and you check in about it because you actually listened. You do not do casual friendship. The concept of a friend you see occasionally and share nothing real with does not compute for you. To you, that is an acquaintance, and calling it friendship feels like a lie. So your circle is small and it is dense. Where other people have 20 relationships 1 inch deep, you have two that go all the way down. And here is what almost nobody says about this: your one or two are usually receiving more genuine friendship than most people receive from 20. They are getting the full intensity of a person who does not divide their loyalty. But there is a cost, and it is a serious one, so let me name it plainly. When your entire relational world consists of two people, you are structurally fragile in a way that people with wider circles are not. If one of them moves away, or has a baby and disappears into that world, or the relationship ends, you do not lose 20% of your social life. You lose half of it. Overnight, and rebuilding is genuinely difficult for you because your standard for entry is so high that new people take years to qualify. This is why so many people with this trait have a particular kind of crisis in their 40s and 50s. They did not become lonely gradually. They lost one person, and the entire structure came down at once. So the practical wisdom here is not to lower your standards. It is to accept that you can have a middle tier without betraying anything. There is a category between soulmate and stranger, and you are allowed to occupy it with people: the neighbor you talk to, the colleague you have coffee with, the person from your class. These are not fake friendships. They are simply lighter ones, and they matter more than you think, because they are the soil from which deeper things occasionally grow. And that high standard for entry is itself the sixth trait, so let us look at it directly. The sixth trait is that your standards for people are very high, and you make almost no exceptions. Let us be precise about what this actually means, because it is regularly mistaken for arrogance. You are not looking for impressive people. That is not it at all. You are not screening for status, money, achievement, or how interesting someone sounds at a dinner party. Some of the people you value most have none of those things. You are screening for something else entirely: consistency, honesty, whether someone's words and actions match, whether they treat the waiter the same way they treat their boss, whether they say the same thing about a person, whether or not that person is in the room. And you are screening quickly, and often without realizing you are doing it. This did not come from nowhere. Almost universally, people with this trait were taught it. Somewhere in your history, you gave someone full access, and they used it badly, perhaps more than once. And you learned, in the way that only experience teaches, that access is expensive and should not be given freely. That is not arrogance. That is tuition. You paid for that lesson. But here is the shadow, and it is one of the most important things in this video. High standards are healthy right up until the moment they become impossible standards. And there is a specific way this goes wrong, which is worth naming. You start looking for reasons to disqualify people rather than reasons to include them. There is a particular kind of relief in finding the flaw. The moment someone reveals an inconsistency, something in you relaxes, because now you know. And now you can stop the uncomfortable process of letting someone in. If that is familiar, then what looks like discernment may partly be self-protection wearing discernment's clothes. The honest truth is that every human being will eventually reveal an inconsistency, because every human being is inconsistent. The question was never whether someone is flawless. The question is whether their flaws are the kind you can live alongside, and whether their intentions toward you are good. Standards should filter for character, not for perfection. If nobody has passed in a decade, the filter may need looking at, not the world. And that self-sufficiency in relationships extends to something even deeper, which is the seventh trait. The seventh trait is that you solve your own problems, and you rarely ask anyone for help. When something goes wrong in your life, watch what you actually do. You do not call 5 people. You do not post about it. You go quiet and you go internal and you work it out. You think it through. You research it. You sit with it at 2 in the morning. And usually, you arrive somewhere on your own, and by the time anyone hears about the problem, you have already handled it, and often you never mention it at all. This is real strength, and I want to be clear about that before I complicate it. You have developed genuine psychological self reliance, which is one of the most useful capacities a person can have. You do not fall apart when support is unavailable. You do not need an audience to process your life. You can hold difficult things without immediately needing someone else to help you carry them. Many people cannot do any of that. But now the shadow, and this one is heavy, so please stay with me. There is a difference between being able to handle things alone and being unable to let anyone help. The first is capability, the second is a wound. And the way you can tell them apart is by asking a simple question. When was the last time you let someone help you with something you could have done yourself? Not something you needed help with, something you could have handled, where you allowed someone to be there anyway. Because here is what most people with this trait have never fully considered. Being helped is not only a transfer of assistance, it is an act of intimacy. When you let someone in on a struggle, you are giving them something. You are saying, I trust you with the unfinished version of me. And when you handle everything alone, always, without exception, you are quietly denying that to every person who loves you. They never get to be useful to you. They never see you struggle. And relationships built entirely on you being fine will always stay at a certain depth because closeness requires that both people occasionally need something. I have known many people who were mystified that their relationships felt shallow, while they had spent 20 years never once admitting they were struggling with anything. You do not have to become dependent. That is not the ask. The ask is much smaller. Let one person occasionally see the unedited version. Say the sentence out loud, I am having a hard time with this. It will feel like an unnecessary exposure. It is actually the doorway you have been standing next to for years. And now we come to the eighth trait, the one I promised you, and it is the one that explains the most. The eighth trait is that you feel other people's emotions far more intensely than most people do, and it costs you. Let me describe it, and you tell me if this is your life. You walk into a room, and you know within seconds whether there was an argument in it before you arrived. Nobody tells you. There is no evidence. You simply feel it in the air. You can tell from 3 words on a phone call that something is wrong with someone. You notice when a smile does not reach the eyes. You catch the half-second hesitation before someone says they are fine. You pick up on tension between 2 other people while everyone else in the room is oblivious. And you do not only observe these things, you absorb them. Another person's distress becomes a physical sensation in your own body. Their anxiety becomes your anxiety. You have left conversations carrying something that was never yours to begin with, and it stayed with you for days. This is why gatherings exhaust you so completely, and here is the mechanism, because this is the explanation nobody has ever given you. Most people in a room of 30 are managing one relationship at a time. They talk to a person, then another, and the rest of the room is essentially background noise. You are not doing that. You are unconsciously processing all 30. Their moods, their tensions, the undercurrents between them, who is uncomfortable, who is performing, who is upset with whom. You cannot switch it off. It runs automatically, and it runs the entire time you are there. So when you leave a party after 2 hours and feel like you have worked a double shift, you have not been antisocial. You have been doing an enormous amount of invisible processing that nobody else in the room was doing. And this reframes so much of your life, does it not? The need to be alone afterward is not a rejection of people. It is recovery. You are not avoiding humanity. You are decompressing from having felt too much of it at once. Now the shadow, and it is significant. When you feel everything, you eventually learn that not feeling is easier. And so people with this trait very often withdraw, not because they lack empathy, but because they have too much of it and were never taught how to manage it, which is genuinely tragic because the world is not short of people who do not care. It is desperately short of people who notice. And a great many of the people who notice have gone quiet in their houses because nobody ever told them that this is a skill with a technique, not simply a burden to endure. The technique, briefly, is this: learn the difference between feeling with someone and taking it on. You can be fully present with someone's pain without absorbing it. And the difference lies mostly in whether you believe you are responsible for fixing it. Most of the exhaustion comes not from the feeling itself, but from the automatic sense of obligation attached to it. And you can manage your exposure deliberately: shorter visits, an exit plan, quiet time scheduled afterward on purpose rather than collapsed into by accident. You do not need to feel less. You need better recovery and clearer edges. So there they are. 8 traits. You cannot tolerate falseness. You think deeply and surfaces bore you. You hold real boundaries. You are comfortable in your own company. You are ferociously loyal to your few. Your standards are high. You solve your own problems. And you feel other people so acutely that crowds drain you. Now, notice what all 8 have in common, because this is the thing I most want you to see. Every single one of them is genuinely valuable, and every single one of them, taken too far, becomes a wall. The intolerance for falseness protects you and can also exclude the merely awkward. The depth enriches you and can also become quiet contempt. The boundaries preserve you and can also become an exit strategy. The comfort with solitude frees you and can also disguise avoidance. The loyalty makes you extraordinary and can also leave you structurally fragile. The standards protect your time and can also become impossible. The self-reliance makes you strong and can also block intimacy. The sensitivity makes you rare and can also drive you into hiding. They are not two different sets of traits. They are the same traits at different doses, which means the question was never whether you are broken or special. The question is whether these traits are currently serving you or currently isolating you. And nobody on earth can answer that except you. So let us return to the question I asked at the beginning, and I want you to answer it honestly now, having heard all 8. Is your solitude feeding you, or is it costing you? If it is feeding you, then hear this clearly. Stop apologizing. Stop explaining your small circle to people who will never understand it. Stop attending things out of obligation and then resenting them. Stop performing a version of yourself that exhausts you in order to be considered normal by people whose opinion you do not actually value. You have built something most people never manage to build, which is a life you can bear to be alone in. That is not a consolation prize. That is the thing most people are chasing their entire lives. And if it is costing you, hear this just as clearly, and please receive it without shame, because there is none in it. There is a real difference between choosing solitude and defaulting into it, and the traits we discussed today are excellent at disguising the second as the first. If you are quietly aching, if there is a heaviness on Sunday evenings, if you say you prefer being alone, but you would give a great deal for someone to knock on the door, then what you have may not be solitude at all. And that is not a failure of your character. It is one of the most common human experiences there is, particularly for people wired the way you are wired. The way out is smaller than you think, and it does not require becoming a different person. You do not need 20 friends. You do not need to become outgoing. For people with these traits, the answer is almost always one person and consistency. One person seen regularly over time. That is genuinely how it rebuilds. And it will require doing the one thing all 8 of these traits are designed to prevent, which is letting someone see you before you are certain they have earned it. Now, one honest and gentle word before we close, because I care about you beyond this screen. This video is a reflection on personality and connection. offered for self-understanding, and it is not a substitute for professional support. If the loneliness has become heavy, if it has lasted a long time, if it comes with a sadness that will not lift, or a sense that things will never change, please talk to someone qualified, a counselor, a doctor, a person you trust. Prolonged isolation genuinely affects both mental and physical health, and reaching out is not a contradiction of everything I have said about your independence. It is the most self reliant thing there is, recognizing what you need and going after it directly. So here is what I want you to do before you leave. Go back down to the comments and answer the question, if you have not yet. What is the one thing people get most wrong about you? And add which of these 8 landed hardest, and be honest about the shadow side too, because that is where the real conversation is. And then read the replies, genuinely read them, and respond to at least one person who sounds like you, not with advice, just with recognition. Say, I know exactly what you mean. Because for someone reading this tonight in a quiet house, that sentence from a stranger will be the most connection they have felt all week, and you are in a position to hand it to them. And here's the question I most want people discussing down there, because I think it divides everyone who watches this. Is a small circle a sign of high standards, or is it sometimes just fear wearing a very good disguise? I gave my answer in this video. I suspect many of you will disagree with me and with each other, and I would genuinely love to read that argument. If any of this landed, leave a like and share it with someone who has been called antisocial by people who never bothered to know them. Subscribe with the bell on, and if you would like to support the work directly, consider becoming a member of the channel, because that is what makes these videos possible, and I am grateful to every person who does. And if you want to go further, the next video takes the 8th trait, the one about feeling everything, and goes much deeper into how to manage it without shutting down. It is on the screen now and already waiting for you, so do not close the app on this one. Go straight there. You are not strange. You are not broken. You are simply built in a way that the world was not designed around. And the correct response to that has never been to change your wiring. It has been to find the handful of people who recognize it. Take good care of yourself, and I will see you in the next one.